Welcome to Courageous Conversations with Lionheart Coaching Co., where we talk about the hard parts of our journey and the courage it can sometimes take to find our way back to ourselves. I'm your host, Mandy Woodard. On this episode, my friend Clare Schmitt comes and she shares her story of major changes that she's gone through over the last few years. She went from being super overworked to stopping completely to now running a very successful consulting business. She talks about childhood and things that have triggered her on her healing journey. I know you're going to be able to relate to so much of this, so let's get started. Hello. This is the final episode of Courageous Conversations for 2022. We made it. Every week I've been able to put an episode out. I'm very proud of that. It has not always been easy. I will be very honest with you. I have at times waited until Sunday evening to get it done just because life is crazy. Fall is usually really busy for most people, and then lead into that holiday season. Of course, we all have so much going on, but it was really important to me that I stay committed to this because it's something that makes me happy. I enjoy putting out these episodes every week, and I love being able to bring them to you. And I also really hope that you found value in the stories you've heard or even in the individual episodes. And I would love to hear if you did. Feel free to give me a shout out on Instagram. My handle is @lifewithmandy_. You could also tag my coaching handle, which is @Lionheart Coaching Co. Either one works. But it makes me so happy when I see that people have enjoyed listening. So today's episode, I have my friend Clare come and talk. And I knew I wanted her to come and be on this show when I was first brainstorming guests, just because I always have the best conversations with her. And I know that she's on that journey, the journey that I'm talking about. Not everyone has embarked on that healing journey yet, and that's okay. We actually talk about that in this episode. But when someone is, and they've been through so much of it, and they've come out on the other side with many things, they usually have a lot of wisdom to share. And that is Clare. She has a lot of wisdom to share. So together, we enjoyed a cup of coffee. You know the one, Cordial Coffee. By the way, I'm going to drop the link in the show notes, but you can also go to cordialcoffee.com/shop and get $5 off of your first order. But the coffee was probably the only thing that went smoothly when we first got started. Literally just minutes before she got here, I came into my office to get my computer set up, and it wasn't waking up. The charger had completely gone out on me, and it was done for. So we just kept problem solving. She had a charger in her car. We tried that. It wasn't enough voltage. So I then tried my Mac, and I couldn't get GarageBand download. So we had to go to the next. Then it was Zoom. We turned to Zoom. And I plugged my mic in, and we used Zoom to record. But the sound is not quite as clear as what you're used to from me. So I just kind of want to put that out there. You're going to hear it. You're going to notice it. I know you are, because so many of you tell me how clear it is. And I love that. But it's still so good. She shared so much wisdom. And I feel so honored that she came and was vulnerable and shared all that she did. All right. That's enough from me. Here is my courageous conversation with Clare Schmitt. I would love to begin with knowing where you're from and maybe what you do now. Can you throw those two things together?
Yes, I can. So I grew up in Manassas, Virginia. That's where I was born and raised part of my childhood. And then we moved to Front Royal, and I have mostly lived in Front Royal since about middle school. And what I do now, like that's such a long journey, a gap from I grew up in Manassas, Virginia to now I am a consultant.
Okay.
In Front Royal. I work remotely, but I have clients across the US.
Mhm.
And I'm actually going to Austin, Texas next week to see a client, and also Atlanta. With COVID, everything went to remote, but I had already sort of been doing remote as far as I'd been doing hybrid for at least 5 years and then doing fully remote for a few years. So now most of my clients are remote, but then I do I travel and do in-person sessions.
I love that. What are you consulting on?
So I guess the briefest way to say is human capital, but I work with people and culture or human resources. Human resources sort of going through a rebrand of going into people and culture, in the industry, but human resources, people and culture. And I also specialize, I guess what I say really is communications.
Okay.
So it's like communications and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So often that's working with people and culture, human resources teams, but there's also change management pieces. So, unfortunately now a lot of companies are going through restructuring. So I would say I specialize in executive transitions, but I help with restructuring, mergers and acquisitions. So sort of the change management piece and the communication piece, and making sure that sort of everyone feels warm, safe, and dry at the end of the transition.
That's really awesome. I feel like that's something that I always think is super needed. So and let me make sure I understand this. Are you helping maybe the upper management connect with the employees and have good communication?
Yes, that's definitely a piece of what I do. And also, there's a lot that goes into if you're transitioning a CEO or transitioning a high-level executive. There's a lot of ripple effects that would be felt throughout the organization if you don't do it well.
Right.
And a lot of people, especially in startups, don't know how to do it well.
No.
So I've been through it enough times now that I sort of have a playbook that I know how to do it well and how it goes and how you can make sure that of course, it's going to have an impact on the organization, but how it can have a minimal impact to the broader team.
Yeah. Well, so what can I ask you how you got to that point? Like, how did you decide that's what you were going to do? You say that, well, wait a second, because you said that was a long journey.
Yes.
So
maybe a very long journey.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear about it. So why don't you just tell me?
Yeah. I feel like the last 5 years is probably the most relevant. So it was actually 2020. I was thinking about, because you asked me before we had this conversation, you asked me sort of, what you basically asked me about transformation and what were some pivotal points.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think how did I get here to this point of okay, December of 2022, I am consulting and I'm traveling and I have my own business. If you had say even 6 months ago, that was not the plan. In 2020, I was a marketing executive. In early 2020, pre-pandemic. And you could sort of say that I had finally achieved all of my professional goals. I had income goals. I had status goals. I had, I thought, this is what I want to be. I want to be a marketing executive. And I achieved that.
In the corporate world.
In the corporate world.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then I thought, I was definitely not happy. I had started sort of a inward journey, I guess, or, self-development journey about 5 years ago. And I had started working with a practitioner that really, when I looked back at the 5-year, I asked her to sort of give me a 5-year look back of where I was when I started and then where I am now. And it was really cool to just see that progression. But looking at that 5 years ago, I was much more rigid. I was very much driven on success and sort of the way the world saw me. And so I did all of the things that would prove to myself and to others that I was a success.
Yeah.
And yet I wasn't really happy. I was pretty burnout. I was very anxious. I was missing a lot of family moments and didn't know why. I did know why. It was you have this high-powered stress job, but I sort of took it for granted that, well, if I'm going to have this high-powered successful job, then I have to be stressed.
Right.
And that it took me a while to get to this point. But now one of the things that I realized, and it was sort of a game changer for me, is that I actually don't want stress to be a part of my life. stress is a response.
Yeah.
So I actually can control my response. Now there's things that can help me do that and things that can hurt, where then I do have that natural response of stress, but I want to live in such a way that stress is not just a part of my life.
So you made a big decision then.
Yes.
To shift from corporate.
Yes. So I actually had two. That's the thing. I was thinking the pivotal moment was actually this summer of 2022, but it was actually February of 2020 when I quit my job. So I sort of had like two quitting. I quit my corporate job in February 2020 and said, I resign as head of marketing. I do not want to do this anymore. I had built this team from like 3 people to 20 people, gone through mergers and acquisitions, seen, executive transition. And I was really burnt out and I thought I have to be done. Well, the CEO at the time said, well, why? They didn't want to lose me. It was like, well, why are you leaving? Well, I really need to spend more time with my family. And at that point I had planned to take a break, but I worked out with the company that I would work part-time, and they still had some mergers and acquisitions planned. And because I was very good at communications and change management and had sort of been doing a little bit of that as head of marketing, still sort of supporting internal communications, they asked me to become their chief of staff. And because it was a new position, they said, well, it'll be part-time. So we had agreed I would work 25 hours a week, which at that point to me was like, it was cutting my time more than half. I was like, that sounds like a dream date. Sure. Well, come to find out, chief of staff is not really a part-time job.
No, it doesn't sound like,
especially when you're doing mergers and acquisitions and having more executive turnover.
Yeah.
And so fast forward I ended up going back full time in like at the end of 2021. So I sort of did quote part-time for a year and a half, but it wasn't really part-time. And mentally it was probably a good transition job. And it ultimately got me to the point where I could do this consulting, but it was just very emotionally and mentally draining because you're like the right hand to the CEO, at least in my case, that, you're the right hand to the CEO. So it's obviously not all the responsibility of a CEO, but you sort of have to think like a CEO and see around corners and sort of hold the entire team.
Right.
Was my experience. So, and, I ultimately it started out as I wasn't going to oversee any people. Well, I ended up overseeing project management and people and culture. So that's, those are two cross-functional across the company teams that are, high impact, and for us, it was high intensity. So it's also hard to be a manager part-time.
Yeah.
So I then decided, okay, I need to probably leave this job. Like, and I would joke with my husband, like, maybe I should go be a barista, or be a bartender, like just something that I can clock in, clock out. I'm not thinking about it, laying in bed at night. So that was the joke. And then in February of 2022, it's interesting that it's always is happening, it was like 2 years later, almost
cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I said to him, what if I didn't work at all?
Yeah.
Like, what if I just took a break and didn't work at all? And he was supportive of that. It was actually kind of funny. We called the kids the day I made the decision that I was like, not going to work. I was kind of emotional, and, it would have been a big change because I've worked for 20 years. And so I talked to the kids. When they got home from school, I looked kind of serious. I had been crying. And so as soon as I tell the kids like, hey, we've decided to make kind of a lifestyle change, my son burst into tears.
Wow.
And I was thinking, wow, I really didn't think that was going to be that impactful. And he said, oh, I'm so relieved. I thought you were going to tell us that you were getting a divorce. And I was like, what? That was not even on my radar. So that was kind of funny. He was like, it's not because of you and dad. Like I was shocked, but I thought, well, what could be so serious that they're talking about? Oh, which is just so funny that you go like something that's so big, such a big deal to you. Yeah. And you think like, oh, this is going to be a game changer for everyone. It's like, not really.
Well, I was
It
actually
ended up-
thinking it maybe would be because now they have their mom that's going to now be home. And that is a huge change.
That is true. I was thinking of the financial impact. I was like, okay, guys,
We can't
we're gonna
do a
have to
whole lot.
We're not going to
Yeah.
be doing as much because we're going from double income to one income. And
Right.
you can't be buying, the latest Nike sneakers, and
Right.
you're not going to be traveling as much and eating out. So I was thinking of it as like, this is a real lifestyle change.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, they were totally down for it. They were like, okay, so we're going to cut back. Okay, cool.
Right.
And then ultimately my company was going through a lot of change. So I ended up overseeing additional executive transitioning to a new CEO, which was an awesome experience. And it was great working for her. And I learned a lot even in that short few months. And then I left the company at the end of June. So I sort of saw them through some additional periods of growth and change, and then decided that I wasn't going to work through the end of the year. So a long-winded way of getting to your question, which was like, well, how did you get to doing this consulting work now? It was sort of one of those, I had the summer completely off, unplugged. I mean, it was really only 2 months, but it was awesome.
Yeah.
I was boating a lot with my son, hanging out by the pool. There's something about when you don't have to be checking your email, texting, and the kids were around. So it was just like, I'm there with them hanging out.
Yeah.
And it was just an awesome experience. I feel incredibly lucky and privileged. I know not everyone can do it, but if you ever, I guess to your listeners, I'll say, if you ever get the opportunity to just chill for a month, for 2 months, to take a break, to take a sabbatical, especially if you're feeling burnout and, especially in the corporate world, but in any kind of a job situation where you're just
so burnout,
so drained and fried, it was amazing for me.
Well, and even if you're not changing a job, just to that is, there's so often you don't want to use up all your leave. So you don't use up all your leave, but it's like, no, use it.
Yes.
Use it.
Go on. Yes, exactly. Take the break. Go on
drain
vacation.
the whole damn thing.
Yes.
Or don't go on vacation, but stay home and do whatever you want to do. Like, just be.
Yes.
Allow yourself that space. I don't think that we get to take those breaks often enough.
Yes.
And
I think we
burnout.
don't choose to take those breaks. I think we don't allow ourselves to. Yes.
That's true.
So it was great to take that break. And I do wish that I had taken longer. Mm-hmm. 2 months was great. Mm-hmm. And I feel lucky to be able to do that. But I sort of wish I had done a few more months. But how I sort of fell into this, and I feel incredibly lucky to say that, but it was, a few people reached out to me and were like, hey, we heard that you're available. You're not working. So I actually had 3 full-time job offers.
Wow.
From the time that I left to the time that I started consulting. And I said no to all 3. And that was really hard. Those decisions, leaving the company, then saying no to this idea of security. And of course it's an ego boost. You're like, oh, people want me, I can do this. But I said no. Because I really decided that whatever the next step was, I was not going to say yes unless it really felt right and would allow me to continue the space that I had created in those 2 months.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to keep the same space. If you're working at all, you're not going to keep the same space as just like chilling on the boat and in the pool for 2 months. But the connection that I made with the kids, the availability, the having space to just listen, be home after they get home from school, things like that. That was the stuff that was non-negotiable for me,
Right. And how old are your kids?
They are 16 and 14. Okay. So they're both in high school, a freshman and a
Such
junior.
pivotal times.
Yes.
You think that it's the toddler years, and it is, that's impressionable, but those teen years are so important.
Yes. And I felt more, I'm glad you brought that up, because I felt more, I guess, worried about missing things in these years than I ever did when they were really little.
Yeah.
When they were really little, obviously those are pivotal years and you have to be there for them. But I actually, early in my career, I had this executive that our paths crossed very briefly, but her kids were actually, she had a senior in high school, and she had 3 girls. So she had 3 high schoolers. And I remember her leaving and taking a sabbatical because it was her daughter's senior year. And I thought, at the time, I thought it was kind of weird. I was like, wow, like you've worked all this time and then you're just like taking a break. well, here I am basically doing the same thing. And Vivian, so my daughter is Vivian and my son is Schmitt. We call him Schmitty. Obviously they both impacted my decision, but with Vivian, I really felt that pull when she started her junior year, or sorry, when she started her sophomore year. It was like, I only have 3 years left.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously we're going to have, I mean, we are close and I know we'll continue. We'll have a good relationship for the rest of our lives. I feel confident in that. I think we've built that together, but it is different when they leave. And I don't think you know this about me, but my brother lived with us when he was in high school. So we sort of, raised him for high school and sent him off to college. And that experience really prepared me, and it was sort of practice. And he's actually home right now. And so, and I told him last night, it's like, it's so good to have you home. But I know that experience of like when he left for college, it has never been the same. It's awesome. He comes home. We just got our Christmas tree last night. We still have all those family traditions, but he's coming home for a visit. He doesn't live there anymore. And that's going to happen with both my kids. I mean, they come back sometimes, he lived with us over the years for pockets of time, but that was the thing I was thinking with Vivian. It's like, yeah, she might come and live here again during the summers, but when they go off to college, that's sort of, they're going out into the world and it's just different. And so that was the thing for me. I just thought, I don't know. I don't ever want to look back at this time and go, I wish that I would have spent more time with her. And I knew for certain that I would not look back at that time and go, gee, I wish I had worked more.
Right. For sure.
And I think that, I guess that's one other thing is I was thinking on the drive over here, what sort of is the like theme of this whole journey that I've been on. And I think it's stripping it down.
Mm-hmm.
And freedom has also been a really important thing ever since I was like 10 years old, very vividly. Like I was like very much, I want to be free.
Yeah.
And I think it's like the more that you're dependent on other people or other things or money or whatever the thing is, the less free you are.
For sure.
So I think that was another piece for me. It was like letting go of the success or the like, well, what are my friends going to think if I'm not working, if I'm just a mom or just, we always tease like, oh, I'm going to be a woman of leisure for the next 3 months, let me tell you,
sit around and eat bonbons.
Yeah. Let me tell you, even being home with 2 high schoolers is still, there's no woman of leisure as a mom, I'm sure you know, but,
yeah. Do you know the things though that you're talking about? I love that you're sharing all of this because there is a major common theme. I talk to women all the time, mainly women. I have talked to men. They have different things. The women are afraid to shift those careers though. They're either being overworked or they have a toxic work environment, but they worked their butt off to get to where they are and they don't want to quit. They don't want to leave. They don't want to step back. They don't want to do the job change because the fear of what's on the other side is so huge.
Yes.
And to make that decision of like, that's it. That's why that was so heavy for you. And you're so emotional that day. Like that's a heavy decision. And I've been there. I've had to make that. I feel like for me though, I don't want to say I lucked out because last year it was hard. When I was ending my photography career, I was able to do like a gradual exit.
Yes.
And so it felt hard when I let my website go and things like that, but it wasn't like, okay, this is scary, but because I already had another net that was about to catch me. I had another business that was already going. So when you are in a career though, where you're not an entrepreneur, you haven't started something else, and you have to make a complete shift where there might be a period of time there where there's no income. I understand that that's really scary, but the bravery and the courage to actually act on it you can now attest to it.
Yes.
For your results. It's like
the leap was rewarded.
Yes.
And I did want to say one of the things you said that spoke to me, because one of the things that I actually do some in my consulting is sort of gender equality work.
Mm-hmm.
So, some companies have pay gaps, some companies have sort of undertones, even like unintentional. They might think they're the most evolved workforce, but there's some, misogynistic undertones or things like that. So that's one thing that I do help. I just worked with a client on that sort of identifying executive pay gaps,
Yeah.
or executive gender pay gaps. And then also, sort of how women were looked at and treated in the organization, and some of those little things that might seem like small things, but even just like how meetings are run, who speaks the most, things like that. And so one of the things that I hope to do is really empower women in the workforce. And I've been there, and I've, fought for everything I have. And so when you said the thing about women are hesitant and afraid to take that leap, I think part of it, and this was something I had to let go of, is that it was so hard to get here.
Yeah.
And what if, like, I don't know if people are going to take me seriously. Women struggle with imposter syndrome. So you go, well, what if I worked so hard to get that that executive job felt like such a reach for me.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have made a lot of progress in society, but there's still some inequity as far as women, women executives. So I think there's that piece of like, I finally got this. I'm giving this thing up that I worked so hard for. I'm not saying men don't work hard for it, but it's, they're just, if you look at the makeup of executives in this country,
it's just different. Yeah.
And so I think that piece is also, it's like, okay, I was okay with, maybe I'll never be an executive again.
Yeah.
But it is like, all that blood and sweat and tears that I poured into it, that I thought that I, had to work twice as hard as my male, peers to get this. And then I'm just letting it go. It almost feels like disrespectful in a way. Like, it's like, you achieved this. You're one of those women that are a statistic now and an inspiration in some way. I don't mean that to sound egotistical, but it's like, oh, wow, you could do it. Maybe I can, even thinking about for my daughter.
Right.
And then just like throwing that all away.
Right.
You have to feel pretty confident that you're doing it for a good reason. Because I just feel like it's more weighty. It's more meaningful. You go, well, what if I don't get that opportunity again? Or what if I then have to start over? And, let's say I took 2 years off until she graduated. Or what if, well, by then my son's going to be a junior. So then do I take a couple more years off, wait till he graduates? Will I still be relevant in the workforce in 4 years? Things like that, which huge. I was asking that, and even my husband, he's very good at playing, devil's advocate or seeing the potential pitfalls. So even he was super supportive, which, by the way, I mean, I could never have done this without a supportive partner, but he was even asking me those questions. So I'm already having all this self-doubt and feeling the imposter syndrome. I already had that even in my executive job, going, do I really deserve a seat at the table? What if they find out that I'm really not good enough?
Oh, yeah.
And so then you're going, okay, I finally got here. I overcame that self-doubt, still had it in the back of my head. Okay, I'm going to leave. And then what's going to happen? I'm going to be able to come back from this, whether it's in 2 months or 6 months or whenever I'm ready to reenter the workforce, or 4 years, depending, because I didn't know. That was the thing. When I left, it was like, you are not going to work again until you feel ready. And until that financial and that external success no longer matters.
Right.
So in a way, leaving, it didn't matter. Like, I left, I made that decision. So I was letting go of it in some way.
Right.
But I had to sort of retrain my whole, like my brain, my spirit, everything about myself. I had to retrain that work was no longer the number one priority.
Yeah.
And one of the things, actually, speaking of priorities, I just want to mention, I was looking at my journal actually from that pivotal moment in 2020.
Oh.
And one of the things that I read was basically like, it was about priorities. And it was like, okay, if Carl and the kids are your biggest priority, why does your life not reflect that?
Okay. I love that you just said all of this. And I'm going to tell you, because when you were just saying the thing about, because what you're saying is very true. Like, I made it here. Why would I leave this? And was it even a fluke that I ended up here in the first place? But I think the other thing that is maybe more unique to women is that need to have it all together and make sure it looks like we have it all together. Mm-hmm. And I can work the job and I can be the mom and I can do all this, when really we're like, whoa, this is a lot. This is
yes,
a lot of stuff.
Yes, it is.
And so it looks like your priorities are work, but it's also, what was it? I mean, you said that need to prove, but so was it also just needing to be able to hold up that picture of this? I am the all-American woman. I can do it all.
Yeah. I think for a lot of years, I believed that I should do it all and that I could do it all.
Yeah.
I no longer believe that. I remember reading Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg.
Ooh, I haven't read
And
that.
I actually don't recommend it. I mean, you can read it, but I don't recommend it. I really think that's actually sort of a toxic mindset.
Okay.
I don't think you can have it all. And I coach a few women executives, and my advice is never you can have it all.
Right.
You have to choose. And there's this idea of, work-life balance is a buzzword and everyone talks about it. And that's what we want, of course. But one of my friends and mentors said to me, Claire, I don't think it's so much about work-life balance as work-life impact. Have the biggest impact you can in work and in life.
Yeah.
And so sometimes in order to have the biggest impact in your life, for your family, you have to take a step back from work or, show up for that basketball game, not be at a key meeting, whatever. And then sometimes to have the impact you need to have at work, you have to sacrifice some things on the home front.
Right.
Or maybe you don't clean your house.
That's usually mine.
Yes. Let's be real. That's mine too. But the other thing though, is someone said to me, this was a woman CEO. She built her own business, rock star. And she said one of her early mentors told her, Carrie, one of her early mentors told her, Carrie, do only the things that only you can do. And when she told me that, it was like a light bulb went off for me.
I mean, that just went off.
Right? I'm like, it's like, that's a writer downer.
Wait a second. Yeah, that's a writer downer.
Do only the things that only
I believe that. And so I talk about that and work with my clients. What can you delegate? What do you not have to do? What is priority number one when you wake up in the morning? And do those things.
Yep.
Delegate the rest.
And in your business and in your life.
Yes. Hire a house cleaner.
Yes. Which I actually do that. And
yeah.
Also, I remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I started doing Instacart.
Yeah.
And it's like a little bit more money, but my son is convinced it's actually not more money because he said, Mom, you definitely buy less on Instacart than if you went through the grocery store, because then you're doing the the visual. So like it offsets the additional cost, offsets the, time for one, because time is money, and also the compulsory buys. So that was something I started of like, I'm spending this time. I really do not like to shop.
Yeah.
So I'm spending this time in the store. It's a grind and it's time away from my family. I'm already working at the time. It's like, I'm working 60 hours a week and I'm, spending time cleaning and grocery shopping.
It's too much.
They're not going to remember that I went grocery shopping or cleaned. They're just not. But they will remember that I put on a movie on a Saturday afternoon and, that we hung out and, went out to dinner together or whatever.
All day on a Saturday.
Yeah. And then I'm in a bad mood and then I'm like feeling resentful because I'm like, I worked 60 hours. What are you guys doing? You know? And so it just, obviously you have to have chores and there's amount of maintenance, but that was actually my husband's idea. He's full of good ideas, but he was like, okay, then why are you cleaning? Do only the things that only you can do. Why are you cleaning? And I know that, you can't apply that to everything because there is some like regular tasks that we have to do that obviously we could outsource everything in one sense, but I think especially as entrepreneurs, you I'm sure can really relate to this.
One day I was sitting there answering emails and I knew I needed to clean the house because it hadn't been in a few weeks. I'd had a very busy string of weeks there and I had potential clients messaging me. And I had several to respond to, and I had to stop. I was like, all right, I got to stop because I got to do what I said I was going to do today and get this house in order. And so I texted my husband. I was like, I am now spending hours cleaning when I could be responding to potential clients and booking calls. Like this is where that time is money.
That is a perfect example. Because it's like you could hire someone to do that other stuff, but you can't hire someone to respond to those clients as handy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece, that's the piece that I'm getting at, whether it's personal or professional. And that goes back to that impact. Have the maximum impact in your life and have the maximum impact in your work.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of even in my consulting business, because part of it, you probably know this because this is relevant to your business too, but I am the brand. So before I could be in the background and I'm comfortable there. Like I prefer that. I'm a good right hand. I didn't really want to be I never had aspirations to be a CEO. It was always like, I just want to be, the right hand, the support function. I'm good at that. And I like that. I'm comfortable there. And a lot of what I do in my consulting is still that, but there still is the piece of me as the brand. And so
right.
I'm hesitant to outsource things because you go, well, if this doesn't go right, it is ultimately on me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I've struggled with, of where what are the things that I need to, what are the things that only I can do, and what are the things that I can delegate? And so some of the stuff as far as like spreadsheet work, or even some design work, things that like I can technically do, but maybe I'm not as good at, or they take me a while. It's like, okay, I could pay a designer to do this presentation for me and it would take them 2 hours, or I can spend 8 hours on it.
Yeah.
That's not a good use of time.
No.
And so that's sort of that, I'm still fighting that because I didn't set out to start my own business.
You just kind of fell into it.
And I need to sort of rewrite that script a little bit, because I'm trying so hard to be deliberate. And I'm like, I have this thing of like, oh, I just fell into it. And by the way, I am fully booked through August of next year.
That's amazing.
So I have a wait
I would
list.
say that's divine.
Yes. I think that's the thing, is I have to like honor that it fell in my lap, and not look at it as like, well, I'm kind of doing this business thing because it's sort of just like, I can't say no to people, like, and so making it deliberate and deciding. And that's how I'm going into 2023. Like, I do feel like Q4 for me was a little bit less deliberate, was a little bit more driven by not being able to say no. I hadn't really figured out my exact target market,
right,
who my ideal client was, what my niche was going to be. Like, it's like, okay, I'm good at communications. I'm good at people. I'm good at change management. I'm good at empowering women. I'm good at coaching people and asking them the questions that helps, get them to where they want to go, as far as mentally in their career. But that's not a business plan. So I'm trying to trust. It's the first, I'm always a planner. And as I have my to-do list and my task list, but that's not how I've approached the business. I don't even have a website. I mean, that was the thing of like, you are your brand. It's like, do I really need a website? Am I going to spend time? It was like on my mental to-do list for like a month in October. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this website done. And it's like, well, I'm full until August. Like, my wait list is in my like calendar.
Yeah.
I don't have a CRM system. Like, and I'm also, my son was like, well, Mom, I remember him saying, he was like, it was funny. It was like in September. He's like, Mom, I think you could have a 7-figure business. And I was like, I don't want a 7-figure business. And he said, what? He's like, I was like, I don't want to work that much. Like, the whole point of doing this is to
work less.
Yeah. And be more deliberate and choose my projects that I work on with, impactful people who are doing good in the world. And so he said, well, you could hire people, and, I'm not saying you do all the work, but like, you could build a team and build this, whole consulting firm. And I was like, dude, I don't want to manage people. Like, I'm learning from my past experience, like a part-time chief of staff. Like, no, I'm not going to manage people. I'm not going to build a team.
What big dreams he has for you, though. That's precious.
And I said to him,
get there one day.
That's the thing.
You just need this year, next year, maybe another year after that, of just doing what you're doing. And then it naturally happens. Like, I don't like I fell into this either. I think that you definitely should say, like, this divine door opened for me and the exact right clients came to me because it was time for me to do that. That's the perfect timing for where I am in my life.
Yes.
And I really think that however much time it is, the exact right people are going to come into your life that you're like, you know what, you would make a great consultant.
Yes.
And next thing you know, you have people working with you, for you, or however you want it to look. But okay, I do want to shift gears because you said something a little while ago or earlier on that I noticed, and it's something that's been on my mind a lot lately. You said you started a self-discovery / healing journey 5 years ago.
Yes.
And I would love to hear about that. I would also love to hear about what led you to that. And I will say this too. It's been on my mind a lot lately because I'm seeing the effects of parents and whoever, mainly parents right now, who do not start that journey. And I see it a lot with the teenagers that I know, and I see it a lot with my adult clients. Their parents never started a healing journey, and now they have this strained relationship. Or the teenagers, they probably do have a strained relationship, but it's more of like they don't even know how to cope with their own feelings and emotions. And it's like, I'm so compassionate and so empathetic and have always honored people where they are. Like, you're going to embark on your healing journey exactly when you're supposed to. Like, that's my typical conversation.
Yeah.
But for some reason, over the last week, I've been like, no, actually, I'm really frustrated. Like, could you just look in the mirror?
Yes.
Like, I feel frustrated that so many people, but I also know that it's not their time.
Yes.
So it's like a duality there for me right now.
I feel you so
So
hard
much
on that,
compassion,
yes.
But also, could you please put in some effort?
Yes.
Like, could you look in the mirror? Like that new anti-hero Taylor Swift. Are you a Swiftie?
I am not a Swiftie.
I'm not either. But I've seen this reel about 100 times. I think it's Anti-Hero is the name of the song. Oh my God. Listen, Taylor Swift fans, do not at me over this. But she's like, it's me. Yes. I'm the problem. It's me. Like, it's that line over and over again. It's like,
I didn't even know that was the Taylor. I have seen that reel as well. I didn't realize it was a Taylor Swift song. I am really not a Swiftie. I am uncool. My daughter listens to this. She'll be like, Mom.
Oh my God, you're so embarrassing. Yeah.
How mortifying.
And I really just attempted to sing. Maybe I'll auto-tune that part.
But that's the piece that I was saying earlier, to loop back to our earlier conversation. That's the piece of when you're dependent on others for your freedom, when you're dependent on others and you're waiting for them to change, then you aren't free. And so that's the thing. It's funny that you said the mirror thing is like, I was saying, like, I'm often like the mirror and the flashlight for some of my clients and even people in my personal life. And I was saying recently, like, I want that for me. Like, I have to be that for myself. Cause sometimes, this sometimes when you're giving other people advice, it's like, well, I actually need that too. Like, can you tell me where my growth edges are?
1050%. That's why I have to always turn to a coach.
Yes. I always have a practitioner of some sort in my life for that reason. Cause you need that mirror and that flashlight. I mean, ideally you are that for yourself. And that's, I think, like the ideal state is
you
when
have blind spots. But we all have blind spots.
But some, like you said, that piece of like, look in the mirror, or, whenever I hear someone say, and myself included, my kids even know to like catch me on it now too. Whenever I hear someone say, well, if they would do X, then I would be whatever. I would be happier.
You are so right. We cannot wait for people to heal. Nope. I will say this though. This hurting people hurt people. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you're either flinging your shit at everybody around you, and that doesn't feel good.
Yep.
Or you are spreading light and love.
Yes.
You get to choose.
Yes.
And I guess my frustration lately has been in the people who are continuing to fling shit when even it's like really so obvious.
Yes. Okay. So to get down to sort of like, where did I get here? So the last 5 years, self-discovery. But in order to explain that, I have to go back a little bit. And I think it's relevant to what you were saying about get your shit together. Mm-hmm. So my dad struggled with addiction. I don't know. I would say his whole life, but I don't know exactly when. I mean, I actually became fully aware and accepted that he had an addiction when I was pregnant with my son.
Okay.
So 14 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you asked about pivotal moments. I'll come back to that as far as sort of how I was raised and some of the family dynamics and not getting your shit together. But my dad actually passed in January. And so, we had that was a huge pivotal moment too, to put things in perspective. And I think it ultimately gave me the courage and the bravery to make my career changes that I needed to. When I took a leave of absence from work, but I can't believe I left that out in that career transition story, but it was the first time that it was like something was more important than work, like where I actually did that. And I cared for him. My siblings and I all cared for him, and my mom the most. For the 4 months he went into the hospital in September of 2021, and then he passed in January. And we were all, I mean, he had to have around the clock care after he got out of the hospital. And so it was like the end of September. And I think I took a month off completely and was just there for my mom and my siblings and my dad. And I was completely unplugged. Like, it didn't matter what was going on at work. I didn't care. I wasn't checking in. But the reason I bring that up, as far as my journey of self-discovery and, going back to my childhood and sort of how I was raised in some of the toxic environments. And I say that with all the love in the world for my parents. I don't resent them for it. I've had a lot of healing. I think at one point I probably did. But the reason I bring that up is there was a lot of healing that happened in those 4 months that my family and I went through. But there was also a lot of pain because we had to look at a lot of things. And there is a dynamic with an addict. I don't know if you have ever had any addicts in your life, but if you have, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's just a dynamic there that if they have not had the healing that they need, even if they are technically not using whatever substance they were addicted to, in my dad's case, it was alcohol, they still, if they haven't gone through real recovery, there's a lot of dynamics in their manipulation, gaslighting, inability to connect.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's like addiction is, I believe there's a lot of things. I'm not a psychologist, but it creates a barrier to connection.
Right.
The substance and the patterns that get created around that. And there was a lot of dysfunction in my family growing up, as far as like, we each took a different role. And, there's a whole thing about family systems, especially with addiction. And, my role became the savior.
Yeah.
And, I had a couple of my siblings live with me. When I was pregnant with my son, I got really entangled with my dad, was trying to help him get sober. He was lying to me and ultimately ended up in a psychiatric institution, which really impacted our relationship for a lot of years, because he really resented me for doing that to him, is how he saw it. And then my mom had a personality disorder. So, and also the dynamic with my dad, there was a lot of pieces that I had a very challenging relationship with my mom from the get-go. We butted heads a lot. I was a very independent child that wanted to do things my own way. And the dynamic of my mom's personality disorder and being in a relationship with an alcoholic, that whole dynamic was just very difficult. And my mom was very much like wanted to be in control. So we clashed a lot. We were, I wouldn't quite say estranged for a lot of years, but we just did not have a good relationship. And when my dad passed, I think the process of having to work together to care for him. And then, actually my practitioner said that when my dad passed, like a lot of stuff dissipated. Like he took a lot of stuff with him, not like to the afterlife, but like it was almost like, imagine like sand just dissipating. Like I almost envision his spirit going, I'm going to get a little woo woo here, but like his spirit going up and like just sort of on the way, like sprinkling the sand across the beach, like that he just took that with him. And it was like, he had this layer of healing sort of over all of us. And, I've forgiven my dad. He made a lot of mistakes and he hurt me. He hurt a lot of my siblings. But I remember like on his deathbed, meaning like over the course of those weeks we spent together, he at one point he said, you're all going to be okay. And that was super healing and peaceful for me to hear. Like, it was like, I felt like he was letting go of a lot. He knew he took responsibility for a lot of the stuff that he had done, but he also was like, it's like, we're all going to be okay. And I feel like as a result, like the stuff that he took with him, for me personally, I'm not the family spokesperson, but I know it has been very healing for me. And it has caused some healing, like, sort of it's how with healing, when one person heals, like it's like a surround sound effect.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it has brought us all closer together. And it's actually also really helped my relationship with my mom. And I've really understood more, like I understand more about her illness and some of the things that she has a lot of, or had, I think still has, but had a lot of unresolved trauma.
Right.
And the thing that's cool is I'm seeing her, she's almost 70, and I'm seeing her get healing now.
Wow.
And really be so much more open than she ever was, when I was growing up. And even some as an adult. And so that relationship it's just been really incredible to me to see how that has evolved.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the whole, like, it's hard that she didn't start that journey earlier. Like, I think about my teenage years, I think about, in my 20s, but at the same time, I guess that's an example that I see. It is your time.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's never too late.
Right.
Yeah.
And so yes, you could say, well, you really kind of screwed your kids over in a lot of ways because you waited until you were almost 70 to start your journey. But it is never too late. And so I guess I share that to say, I really, what you say about the duality does resonate, because there's a part of me that's like, why did you wait till you're almost 70? But then I also go, not everybody has the resources. Like I think that, so that dynamic that I just described, I'm being a little rambly here, but that dynamic that I just described, I think in my 20s, I was like, I don't want to have this dynamic. So that's really what drove me to.
Correct.
Yes. Like, it was like, I don't want
break the cycle.
Yeah. To break the cycle. I was like, I don't want to have that dynamic with my kids. I don't want to have that, dynamic with my spouse. So Carl and I had done marriage counseling, I had done therapy myself, but fast forward, all that stuff that was hard about our family system and family dynamic, it was, I guess, about 10 years ago or 9 years. Anyway, I was 29 years old. And I would say that I kind of, it was like about a 2-year period. I like tried very hard to blow up my life, engaged in a lot of self-destructive behavior. I won't share all of it here, but just that 2 years is like a time period in my life that I've gone through a lot of healing around, but I have a lot of guilt and shame and regret. And I was not a good partner. I was not a good mom. I mean, my kids were luckily young enough that it wasn't as impactful. Like, thankfully, I'm not going through that now, but I was not present. I would say for that 2-year period, I'm not sure I really had a meaningful connection with anyone in my life. And so I had a lot of guilt and shame about it. Now I have healed from a lot of that and feel like, wow, like in a way, I feel like the phoenix rising from the ashes, because from that 2 years, I don't think if I had engaged in all of that self-destructive behavior and tried to blow up my life, and thankfully didn't, I don't think that I would be where I am today. So it's sort of like, it was like, I tried the awful way of dealing with your shit.
Yeah.
And was like, well, this isn't working. And I made a decision. It was actually my older sister that helped me sort of come out of that time period, because she was basically like, called me on it. Like, we're not having a meaningful relationship. I don't really want to like have this fake relationship. We were best friends, and now you're just being sort of an asshole.
Right.
Why should I basically invest any time in the relationship?
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that she was able to
jolted you.
It really did. Well, it was almost like that ultimatum. It was like, oh, I'm going to actually lose. Like, no one had forced me to lose a relationship.
Right.
It was almost like I was waiting. Like, I kept pushing until someone was
wait, I want to know, you were like 28 to 30?
Yeah. Or 29 to 31. Like, I would say like,
because
the beginning of my 31st years.
Saturn in return?
No, I have not.
Okay. So everybody experiences it. It's usually between 28, 29, 30. This is a human design thing. Actually.
Oh, okay. I did not
Saturn
know that.
returns to the location it was at birth, but what happens is your world crumbles.
Oh,
I mean, everything falls apart.
Wow.
Everything. Like those self-destructive behaviors. And I'm not saying everybody has this extreme example. Somebody might just have the feelings.
Right. And not act out.
Right. I mean, some might act out. I remember feeling really like everything was falling apart for me, and even my relationships weren't what they once were. So I felt like I was losing relationships myself with family members at that point.
Yeah.
But it was like, you have all this fallout because you have a whole new foundation that's about to come up.
Yes.
But you have to experience all of that crap, sometimes really hard crap, to get there.
Yes. Agreed.
So, I mean,
so that was like in a nutshell, like that was like, it was like the destructive way. And then I wanted to find a way to break the cycle. Like I felt like, I recommitted to I feel like I recommitted to my life. Like I am going to live my life. I'm going to be a good partner. I'm going to be, fully commit to my marriage. I'm going to, live a good life. And I wanted at that point, then I had very addictive behaviors with work, and used it as avoidance and escape. So I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. So at that point, I left that job and took a job that was easier. Like it was one of those like jobs that I could do in my sleep sort of. I ended up getting kind of bored with that, but I sort of look at that as the year of recovery. Like that again, going back to that stripping it down, when I was at that job, I was there for a year and it was kind of the recovery. I sort of reconnected with everyone. I gave myself some grace. I was in pretty intensive therapy, traditional therapy at that point. And then at the end of that year, that's when actually I discovered coaching. I changed careers again, still had some bad work patterns, but this was like 5 years ago. That is when I really started the journey of like looking at other modalities of healing besides therapy. And when I first went to Becky Lanham, she's a tremendous integrative practitioner, healer. I don't even know what she calls herself, but she's just been so impactful for me and my family and my life.
Yeah.
But I went to her for body work.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I have pain in my body. So I was storing, a lot of stuff in my body. So that's where, and when I came to her, I was not like, hey, can you help me integrate and process my emotion and help me heal myself? Like what I could say now to a practitioner, it was like, hey, can you make it so my back doesn't hurt?
Yeah.
And that when she did, that's who I was talking about when I said the 5-year review earlier in the episode. She reading that of like where I was when I got there was incredible because I thought like, I still now have doubt, I went like, am I really changing? Like, when I get triggered or when I yell at my kids, I go, who are you kidding? Are you really like becoming a better human being?
Oh, no, I have that thing. I feel like I have to say that because I talk a lot about parenthood. I talk a lot about communication. I help clients all the time. It's got to be so clear that it really doesn't matter. I still ask myself that same question when I might yell at my kids, when I really try not to yell at your kids. I try really hard not to yell at my kids.
Right.
But when they get physical, it's a trigger for me.
Yep.
If they hurt each other, it's a trigger for me. And then it's like, knock it out.
Yes. Yes. I know.
It's that mom rage comes up. But I will say the last time it came up, I caught it pretty quick. I went for a walk in the backyard.
Good.
And I came back in. So I can see the progress.
Yes.
But it doesn't change that you still have these. And it doesn't mean you haven't made any progress.
Right. I know. Well, and that's the, it's a joke now. I had a trigger actually recently with my mom and addiction, like with actually she was helping an addict and it was triggering for me. Mm-hmm. And so stuff came up about my mom. Like we've been in such a good place. And I actually told her, I love you. And I want you to know, like I'm owning. I was teasing my husband. I was like, I was acting like a toddler. And I said to my mom, I know this is mine to own.
Yeah.
I'm triggered. I'm going to deal with it and come back when I like can not be coming from a place of trigger. That goes back to the whole mirror thing of like, look at you. Like I could have sat there and gone, well, my mom is doing,
it's your fault. You
did this. All this, or like, well, if you're doing that, no, but that's not going to make me free or happy. And I was able to work through it super fast because I realized I was getting triggered, went away, dealt with it, and then came back and then can deal with it appropriately now where it's a conversation where it's like, hey, this is actually the facts of what happened. Here's some of my concerns. Here's the impact that it had on me.
And how did she receive that?
Oh, she was great. I mean, she really was great. Like,
that's the thing too, is like I feel so happy for you that you're able to do that because there's such a denial of responsibility that can happen with older generations, especially of like, I didn't do anything to you. You should have known how bad I had it.
Yes.
I had it way worse than you had it.
But I've worked with my mom a lot. I will say sometimes because of my dad being an alcoholic, I think she used that a lot as an excuse.
Right.
That used to be triggering for me. And it still is sometimes triggering to some of my siblings. But I think what I'm seeing is that she is noticing that more and being willing to take responsibility, where I can say to her, Mom, I think you're sort of using that as an excuse. Regardless of what you were going through, that was a damaging experience for me, for my sister, for whatever, for whoever. And she's able to now look at that, where like a year ago, even, I'm not sure that she could really look at it.
Phenomenal though.
Yeah. And she's apologized for things.
That's huge.
Yeah. That's huge. Sometimes just hearing someone else. I mean, I know I said we always have to look at ourselves, but sometimes hearing someone take responsibility for the impact that they've had on you is really healing.
Yes, it is. And when there's a lot I could say on that. Denial of responsibility is one of the most alienating things we can do in a relationship, though.
I agree.
And so I'm glad you have that. I know a lot of people don't.
And it's very painful. Yeah.
It's very painful. And some people lose their parents and never get that. And then they are processing that. And that's a whole different journey. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there's no wrong paths. I do believe that.
Right.
But
I do believe in that everything happens for a reason.
Me too. Yeah.
But I think that with so just taking it back, because I know you said as far as this sort of discovery. So after that self-destructive period, I started that healing journey and got into coaching, got into, seeing more functional practitioners or integrative practitioners, and started learning, like from that moment when I said, I want to heal my body, and then to now where it's like body, mind, and spirit, and seeing how they all interact, and then going to some, using some, I guess you would say, alternative therapists where they use, I've gone through EMDR. That's not alternative, but it's, I think, a newer thing. It's not as widespread across the industry. And then also just understanding like traumatic experiences that I would say that I'd healed from, like I had gone through talk therapy.
Yeah.
I hadn't processed them in my body, if that makes sense. Like,
I love that you're saying that. It does make sense, because this is what I talk about here, is that there are multiple ways, and sometimes talk therapy isn't the way. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you find a different modality, energy work or EDMR, or whatever it might be, or a practitioner like Becky, who I freaking love as well.
Yep. I know her wait list is like,
she'll be on the show. You'll get to hear from her. But you can do that and then be like, you know what? I need to go talk to a therapist today. It's like you can kind of go bounce around, but we feel like there's one path to healing.
Right. And there's really not.
And
the thing is, I don't know that I could have processed the emotion in my body if I hadn't gone through talk therapy.
Right.
I think that's the thing, is like, it all does work. Like, I'm not knocking that. It's more like all of these modalities of healing that I have engaged with have gotten me to where I am today.
Yeah.
And what came up for me when my daughter was about to turn 15, and this is when I really started to understand how sort of the body, I don't know if you've read The Body Keeps the Score. I haven't finished it yet, but it's very,
it's at my office. I was about to say, I've started it. Yeah.
It's very interesting. And I like the idea is like that we hold all this in our body. My daughter was turning 15. My dad left on my 15th birthday, actually. Like it was a very like toxic dynamic at that time in the household. I wish he had not left on my birthday, because that created a lot of like trauma. Even though I agreed with
birthday
the decision,
trauma.
It created birthday trauma for a lot of years that I actually didn't fully heal until I was like 32.
Right.
But older than that, because when my daughter was about to turn 15, it came up again. I was actually in therapy, a therapy session, just a regular one. And I was just like, she was like, oh, okay, tell me more about this dynamic with your daughter that you're having, because it was very unusual. And what came out of it was she's about to turn 15, and I was having all of this trigger around my dad leaving when I turned 15, but I had not processed it in my body and like emotionally until that moment. Now, I had told this story 1,000 times probably, and never had that emotional reaction, like thought I had gotten it out. I had cried in therapy when I was, 16, and again in 20, in my early 20s. And having that experience, that was actually when it really crystallized for me there are multiple ways to process trauma. And often we have to reprocess the trauma over and over again. It's not like one and done.
Yeah.
So I processed it. And I honor that part of my journey, processing it verbally.
Right.
But there's a piece, and then I processed it sort of in my body, emotionally, more absorbing it. And then the finishing was the body work and energy work with Becky.
Yeah.
That is when it was like fully, for me, fully processed.
I love that you just told that story. It's so freaking important because we heal. Like if you could imagine a pile of clothes and you pull one article of clothing off and you pull another article of clothing off, and you're not going to heal it all at once. And this is where my empathy and my compassion and my love, and it's your healing journey is your healing journey because it came up for you right when it was supposed to come up for you.
Yes.
So see, that's that. Again, that duality, I honor that so much because that's the truth for me too. I thought I was fully healed from a wound. And then it comes up.
Spoiler alert. No one is ever fully healed.
But you can feel better. You can feel peace.
Yes.
Yes. But you never know when you're fully healed.
Well, I guess, and the reason I say that, I don't mean that to,
I know exactly what you mean.
Optimistic piece, but it's like, don't ever stop being on your healing journey.
Oh,
being a better person. It's like, you're never going to go, oh, that's it, I'm done.
Well, and
until you're dead.
Can I just be really honest here?
Yes.
Is I thought that that's what happened for me, that I healed that.
Oh,
I'm good now.
100%.
I'm good now.
I remember I was like mid 30s and I said, I'm 95% of the way there.
Oh God. Okay. I'm mid 30s and I'm pretty sure I said that.
And then it's so funny. Like now I'm like 15% of the way there.
No, you're further than that. I'm certain of it.
Well, I plan on living a long life.
Okay.
So that's why I say that. No, it's more that there's so much. And if you look at it as a destination, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. For me, it's like, so I shouldn't even say, I joke and say I'm 15% of the way there, but it's more like Becky actually gave me this analogy of a spiral. It's like, we're on this spiral and we're just continuing to like go on our journey, and we're going to take little detours sometimes. And then we get back on the track, and it's just a journey. But if you think of it as like, the longer you live, like the more the spiral goes out, it's like, it's never ending. It's a never ending journey, and you can choose to stand still. You can choose to move forward. You can choose to like go into a little detour and get stuck for a while, but the path is there if you just keep following it. Like sort of you're creating your own path. Great. And that's when I say you're never fully healed, because it's like, there's always the opportunity to do more and go deeper. And really, like, most people, I feel like in this world are not living 100% from a place of love and light.
No.
And that's the thing, is like, until I believe, and I kind of believe like, until you go into the afterlife, you don't fully get there.
Right.
But that's what I mean by it's never done, because like, unless you can say, I live 100% from a place of love and light.
Yeah.
Which I think if most people say that, they're deluding themselves.
Right.
I think until we get there fully, like, but not to see it as a discouraging thing, just of like, yeah, I'm on this journey and I'm going to continue to better myself and get to a place of a more open heart, more love and light, and just, and flood the world.
I do find what you've said very encouraging, though, that you're never fully healed, because the person that's sitting with, why haven't I healed yet? Yes. And they feel like they're forever broken and there's something wrong with them because they haven't been able to overcome this thing. Well, honey, it's because it ain't your time yet. And just keep doing the work. Keep doing the work. And it's okay. It's okay. I think that we need to tell each other that more.
Yeah.
It's
and
okay.
I think when you're stuck, sometimes I think it's okay to come back to things.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I just not be triggered by this person? Or why can't I not yell at my kids? I'm not saying, oh, just be like, well, screw it, I'm just going to yell at my kids all the time. But sometimes, I've talked to my sisters a lot about this, sometimes it's not the right time for that thing.
Yeah.
So if you're finding yourself coming up over and over again, like this just feels insurmountable, it may be time to take a step back, to kind of sit with yourself, to just have a rest period. You don't always have to be on the spiral. You can stand still for a second.
Oh my God, I love it. You just said that. You can rest.
Yes.
You don't have to hyperfixate on that healing.
And sometimes you can get, it's almost like you can get addicted to the healing of like, oh, I'm getting better. Oh, I want to get more better. Okay, what's my next thing I need to heal?
Let go and let divine tell you.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't have a roadmap. It's not an annual planning session of like, okay, what am I going to heal in 2023? Yeah. That's not how it works.
Oh, really? I was doing that. Kidding. like, okay, let me mark these things off my list.
Don't worry. I love a good list, but it's that flexibility. I think that's the other piece is like, that's something that's been huge in my healing journey is learning to be flexible, learning to listen to the divine. And whoever whatever your higher power is, it's like we all have a higher power, and you listen to that, develop that relationship, get to that place of being still and resting and listening and going, all right, what do I need to know? And in your body, it's just unlocking that knowledge.
Yeah. Because it's in you.
Yeah.
It's in here. Oh my God. If there's one thing I could teach people, it's to get to that still space. Listen to your North Star, whatever it is. Follow that. Listen in here, though. Don't listen to all this out here.
Yep.
Don't listen to mom. Don't listen to dad. Don't listen to siblings. I mean, you can take that into consideration. It's valuable to have other people in your life that have good guidance for you. But truth be told, you already have the answers.
Yes. And we're always, I think often we're looking for validation from others. And I think that's the piece of like what you just said. Yes, take in the advice, but you can't be dependent on all those people for validation. Yeah. And I'm talking about adults. Obviously, there's a different dynamic with kids.
Right. Listen for guidance there.
Right. Yeah. But for, when you're an adult, it's like you have to be the validation and in your gut. But I think so many times we're busy running, and I'm still guilty of this, doing that rat race. Yeah. Chasing around, doing all the to-do lists, like hyperventilating. And then you lose your groundedness, and you can't, and unless you center and take that moment, the stillness, the rest, that's when your intuition shows up. Right. And one of my practitioners says, it's like your most valuable superpower is your intuition.
I very much believe that.
And so many
very
people
much
don't
agree with that.
But you have to listen.
I literally wrote it down. I was listening to meditative music in the shower, and it just triggered some major inspiration for me. And that was like the thing. And it's always my thing. I always am teaching my clients that, but it's like, no, we actually really need to go hard at this thing. Listen to your intuition. Yeah. Listen to that inner light. Yeah. It's so important. Okay. To wrap this up, do you have anything that you maybe had that you wanted to say that you didn't get to, or any valuable advice that you'd like to leave people with, or maybe something funny? Maybe, do you have anything?
I also help companies with like annual planning, goal setting, process stuff. And I kind of nerd out on those things, like on the personal side too. Yeah. And so as I'm thinking, like right now I'm going through a lot of this with my clients, but then I'm thinking about like for me, and I know I just said it's not a to-do list, you don't, here's my healing for 2023, right. But on part of my process, getting ready for the next year. And this is very key for what I said happened in 2020. I pulled out my vision board from 2020. Okay. And I also pulled out my vision board that I never created for 2022. But I had gotten all the pieces together. I just had never actually created it. Right. And this just goes back to we know in ourselves. Mm-hmm. The things that I put down on the vision board, like I could not have told you when I was creating the ones, in 2020. I know you can't see the visual, but here you can see there's a picture of like it says things that make me smile. And it's like the beach and my family and the things that are important to me. And it took 2 years. Like this to me, this vision board that I'm looking at that I actually brought here just to remind myself, it took 2 years, but I had that this summer. Wow. And I think that's the piece of like, I knew then what I needed, where I was headed, where I was going. I didn't totally understand. It was like, oh yeah, this picture, all these pictures make me feel happy, but it says family, easy to love, worth the time. It's a wonderful life. Getting to know, joy of cooking, which like, I didn't know what that meant, but I spent the summer cooking with my son.
That's amazing.
And then I had done, like, I went back and looked at my journal, like I said, and it was I had one that was sort of family oriented. It said family and career. That was the intention that I went into the vision boarding with. And it says joy, They see problems, you see potential. Your next great adventure is closer than you think. Beautiful and confident, drive to succeed, strong, focused, fresh starts. You are awesome. I love my job, with a little girl in yellow with balloons. And I'm not saying that I didn't have some of these things in 2020 and 2021, but I definitely feel like this board that I created, it wasn't exactly the plan. It was more like that future. I mean, vision board is like you're looking, you're sort of manifesting. That came to fruition now. And then when I was looking at my board that I had created for 2022, it was so much about like 2022, but also about 2023, like to the point of where I thought, actually, I'm going to put this together for 2023.
Oh, perfect.
But I wasn't ready. Like, it's not like, oh, I failed because I have a, poster board with a bunch of cutouts that I never put on there.
Yeah.
It's like, it was in there, it was percolating, and now it's ready. And the thing that I was going through it and I had pulled everything out, but I had not pulled this little paper out that I had cut out. It said, what if you saw things differently?
Yeah.
So I think that was on my heart to share. So I don't know how it totally ties in with our conversation.
It really does.
But the what if you saw things differently is like, I was like, oh, that's like a writer downer.
Yeah. I love it.
Like, I think that's a good journal prompt. So that I really wanted to, share that, because I think that's something that we can all ask ourselves on the daily.
Mm-hmm.
What if you saw things differently? When we find ourselves getting kind of intractable, we're like, well, this person did something this way, or, well, I think, when we get super attached to outcomes or things that are happening or getting our way or looking at it a certain way. And, right now, like the political landscape of our country is so divisive.
Mm-hmm.
And, and not even that, but sports, like there's just a lot of like angst. And it's like, if you just ask yourself, what if you saw things differently?
Right.
And then I'll close that. This is like my saying sort of for my business of like, everything is possible.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing, is like, if you saw things differently,
you would see
the possibility.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that so much. I think that was perfect. I'm so grateful you came and shared. I feel so honored that you sat here and shared your story with me and everyone that gets to listen.
Well, thanks for having me. I definitely was not like, I had no idea what I was like. I don't know that I said everything that I was going to say. And I think I said, or that I thought I was going to say. And I think I said things that I didn't think I was going to say, but this is, like I said, I like being behind the scenes. So it was like a stretch for me, but that's the whole, like, what if you saw things differently?
Yeah.
Everything is possible. I was like, why not go on a podcast and talk about your journey? Even if it inspires like one person and helps them and gives them a little bit of feeling of comfort or joy, or, a different way of looking at things. I'm like, it's worth it.
I don't know. I think your story is going to inspire a lot of people, because there's so much in your story that other people can see bits and pieces of themselves in, whether it's with your job change, with your relationship with your mom, the relationship with your dad, your kids, having to take that time off, like all of those things. I know a lot of people that have even little bits and pieces of that. And I think that it's going to really resonate. So I'm really excited.
Well, good
About this.
I really appreciate you having me on. It was fun to get to chat.
Good.
I'm like, my aunt and I say that we're growth nerds. So,
I'll say that too. I'll be in that growth nerd club with you.
Yeah.
That's for sure me. And probably the people listening, because that's literally the whole thing is, let's grow, let's heal, and embark on that journey.
And it's a game changer for your families and for your kids.
Yes.
And that's the thing, like our kids are the future of the world. And if we heal ourselves, that's the biggest gift we could give our kids. I mean, I have 2 teenagers, and I think I have a very good relationship with both of them. Of course, there's work to be done, but I think that I don't think you have to have a terrible relationship with teens.
I don't think so either.
I think if you heal your own shit and realize it's not all about you, you can really have good relationships, not just with teens. Teens will test you the most, but like, that's the thing. You can have good relationships, but you got to look in the mirror. Like you said, that's
my God. Yes. And you just said everything that I've been thinking this week. Is that right there?
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mandy.
All right, you guys. Thank you so much for listening and being part of this first season of Courageous Conversations. I cannot tell you how much it means to me. Make sure you check back. We will be back in February with all new episodes. But until then, please remember, you are loved and you are valued and you are appreciated. Bye now.